I'm the president of the Urban Planning and Policy Student Association, also known as UPPSA, and I'm joined today by Malik, who's the president of SBUP. Hey, Malik.
Hi, everyone. Hey, Jenna. I'm glad to be co-hosting with you.
Woohoo! Thank you, everyone, for joining us on a Friday. This is the 13th Annual Urban Innovation Symposium, and we are thrilled to be co-hosting this year. The student groups work together really intimately all year, and we know that our programming is stronger when we work together. So before we get going, just a couple quick things. Feel free as we get going to drop questions in the chat. And I'm going to share my screen for a moment. Just walk us through a couple notes to ground us in our ethics and practice in this program. So this is our working land acknowledgement, and this is something that continues to be iterative and respond to our continued social education. So the acknowledgement you see today began with the collaborative writing process as part of our plan making classes last spring, and will continue to deepen, iterate, and be responsive to our ongoing social education. As students and future planners, our team acknowledges that the lands on which the UIC campus resides are the legacy of Indigenous peoples. We name this history and honor the experience and existence of the three fire peoples, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. We believe these traditional territories are improperly acknowledged by the official UIC statement in its current form, and name unequivocally that the three fires peoples who lived and moved through these lands for hundreds of generations were removed by forces of violence. Today, more than 34,000 tribal members call Chicago home, yet many urban Indigenous peoples are left out of the planning process. Moving forward in our careers, we pledge to implement concrete strategies to engage and support the needs of Indigenous communities, redress harm from historic and current wrongs, and provide support by explicitly prioritizing their voices. We benefit from living and working on their traditional homelands, and we affirm their sovereign rights as First Peoples. We pay respects to their elders, past and present. And so we encourage members of our community, our colleague organizations, and friends to continue their own practice of land acknowledgement. A good place to start is native-land.ca, where you can type in your address and learn more about the native lands on which you work, live, and play. Please note it's important to contact your local nations to verify this information, and thankfully this website gives you direct links in order to be able to do so. We're also naming the ongoing legacies of anti-Black violence that the city of Chicago has long perpetuated through its formal social, political, and economic policies. Additionally, the UIC campus itself displaced thousands of mostly Italian, Mexican, and Greek residents in the 1960s in order to expand on the territory it claims today. Mayor Daley and local business interests were also looking for a site that could act as a buffer between the Loop and the low-income South and West Side neighborhoods. This legacy is a huge stain on the moral fabric of UIC, and as the next generation of planners graduating from this university, it's our responsibility to undo these policies, mitigate future harm, and create more collaborative practices of planning for the future. From a planning perspective, we're heartened that this has begun to be addressed in the We Will Chicago Plan, the first citywide plan in more than 50 years that was just adopted this past February. However, we think the city has more to do and has some more responsibility along with the private sector, and our careers coming out of this program focused on community-centered and community-led equity planning and reparative planning will continue to push the city to do so. So to conclude, we acknowledge the ongoing legacies of violence against Indigenous peoples and people of color in this country as they provide a context for this work and for this symposium. And so we aim for our individual and collective labors to respond directly to this and to center equity, imagination, and resilience. And so with that as a backdrop for our work today, I want to just hand it over to Malik to introduce more about SBUP and what we're doing here at the symposium, and then we'll get started.
Yes, I'm happy to represent the Society of Black Urban Planners. We have been very active this year in programming. Very excited to be hosting some of our programs, including the exposure program at Lindblom Math and Science Academy, And we also have some really exciting events coming up throughout the month of April, including a LinkedIn Day and a bake sale that will be starting here soon. Real quick, I'd like to dive into some of the inspiration behind this year's symposium, which we are happy to be hosting. This year's symposium emphasizes the essential role that politics and advocacy, as well as art and design and planning, play in influencing choices about urban planning and advancing social equity in cities. It provides a forum for discussion and sharing of best practices on how to organize and involve communities in the planning process, develop inclusive policies and strategies, and establish alliances to promote equity and justice in urban settings. So we will be beginning with our first panel of the art and design and planning. And then after that, we will move to our next panel, which will be focused on politics and activism in planning. Once again, I'm very excited, and I hope you all enjoy this panel and symposium as much as I know we will.
Thanks so much, Malik. And with that, I'm going to spotlight our first facilitator, Brian, and our panelists.
Well, thank you very much, Malik. We really appreciate your leadership and work that you've been able to do to make this symposium such a great success. I'm Brian Larson. I am the APA Illinois representative on behalf of UPPSA and facilitating today's art and design panel. We have three excellent panelists here to be able to share their experience and work with us, and I hope we'll bring a warm welcome to each of them. First, we have Garrett Anderson. He is the Economic Development Director for the City of Woodstock, Illinois. Prior to working with the City of Woodstock, Garrett was the Economic Development Director for the City of Branson, Missouri. He holds a BA in Urban Planning from Brigham Young University, an MBA from Lindenwood University, and is a graduate of the Oklahoma University Economic Development Institute. He is active in the Rotary Club, the Chamber of Commerce, and is a mentor for the student entrepreneurship class at Woodstock High School. Toby Sachs is a member of the Evanston Art Council. He is a co-founder of Enrich Evanston and is a communications and marketing consultant to social service and arts organizations through the Taproot Foundation, Arts and Business Council of Chicago, and Compass Chicago. Finally, Henry Wishcamper is the founder of Bustling Spaces, LLC. He's an author, theater artist, and urban planner focused on the role that arts, cultural, and recreational spaces can play in generating equitable, hyperlocal economic and community development, particularly in historically disinvested communities. Please join me in bringing a warm welcome to all three of our participants today. Now, we're going to begin with a brief introduction from each of our participants, starting with Garrett. And Garrett, I would just ask that you unmute yourself.
Do you want me to just dig into my slides at this point?
That would be wonderful.
Great. Let me
yes.
share my screen. All right, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. All right, so the main concept I want to bring forth here is that the fun intersection between local urban planning and the arts. The arts are integral to much of what local communities do, primarily because your local arts scene is really, and often your communities are your first introduction, your easiest introduction, and your boots on the ground introduction to the arts. It's your low barrier of entry arts community. In fact, our city government is arranged such, this is our city org chart for the city. A lot of it's public safety. You've got police, parks, street, police and streets and building department, that kind of stuff. But a lot of the rest of what we do is quality of place. It's these other departments. We got our recreation where we're doing dance classes, music classes, painting. We have our public library where we're learning literature for the first time and really digging into those kind of programming, but also classes and in drawing and painting and piano, that kind of stuff. In fact, this is our schedule for this very week on our city website right now. And we've got spring art show going on. We've got, AARP tax appointments if you want to get your taxes done. We got a Hollywood presentation from Danny Trejo coming through. And then we have our Peep Show, which is a hilarious springtime thing we do. If you haven't experienced one of those yet, it is Peeps, dioramas of Peeps. It's hilarious. And then somewhat unique in Woodstock, we have an opera house department. We have an old historic art house that's still owned and operated by the city. It's been in operation since the late 1880s, which provides not only touring presentations, shows, concerts with professional touring groups, but also local theater, local choir, ballet. There's a gallery space that we rotate every month with new local artists that come through. So it's definitely a somewhat unique opportunity for local participation in the arts. Adjacent to that building is the Stage Left Cafe, where they do a lot of participatory programming, open mic nights. It's poetry, it's comedy, it's just about anything. Jazz nights, they're in the lower right here. For example, my son, as a high school student, was able to just jump in to this jazz group. They just rotate through the artists all through the night. You just bring your horn, bring your drums, whatever, and you can just rotate in, and they'll just kind of free flow jazz all night long. It's a lot of fun, and it's a local, very, very local participation in the arts. We have a big 2-acre park right out, in the center of town. If you've ever been to Woodstock, it's your classic town square, county seat community. And there's band concerts all summer. In the summer, if you look down here in the lower right, that is not a typo. This is the 139th summer that we're doing band concerts on the square. This has been going since the 1880s. And then what you're seeing in the upper right here is the farmers market booths around the square. During the farmers market, they have live music every weekend, Saturday. Again, rotating through. So, and then historic preservation. Architecture is one of the most important arts. Is anybody recognize this house in the lower left? Anyone? One of the things that Woodstock is famous for is the movie Groundhog Day. It was filmed here. So film is also another important part of our community at the local level. We do a lot of film promotion. We work with the Illinois Film Office. We've had, just in the last couple of years, we've had HBO, Amazon have both been here filming. We've had commercials, a lot of things being filmed here. And you can still eat at the very table where Phil and Rita ate in the movie if you want. Big mural, it's downtown, talking about Orson Welles has roots here in Woodstock. Dick Tracy, which is, most of you are too old to have ever read the Dick Tracy comic, but the artist that did that Dick Tracy comic for 50 years or so lived here in Woodstock. So what I've just discreetly gone through was the 7 traditional arts in, we're trying to cover as many of those as we can as possible in Woodstock. But again, it's the important part is not that it's Woodstock, it's that all of your communities and you as potential, future planners or current planners have a role to play in promoting these arts in your communities. These are all what makes quality of place work. So we just last year, this line you're seeing here was a mural, and this really got us all kick started. Was this mural process? The implementation was awesome in the end. We had a regional artist from Milwaukee come down, and he actually invited people to come in and actually using spray paint participate in the process of creating the mural. It was really fun because it was a community event. People actually helped create it, but that really kicked us off into the process of our arts plan, which was in the future, how do we want to really address the creation of public art? How do we want to promote art, and how do we collaborate among the different groups that are doing art in the future? So we now have created an arts commission, but independently before that, we've had separate boards and commissions at the city level, as well as independent groups that are covering different elements of that. And so what we're trying to do is kind of wrap all of this up into a single plan that covers all of these disparate elements of the arts and what we do in town into a single plan. So we've done a lot of community input, heard a lot of really important things about focusing on the history of the future, being organic, including diversity, both in the sense of including diverse populations, as well as having a lot of variety in art as the result of the process. This is what we've come up with as our statement, which is that Woodstock's dynamic and multifaceted arts environment inspires new ideas, unleashes curiosity, ignites joy, and forges connections in the community while fostering a vibrant economy. Because ultimately, that's my role in this as the economic development director, is helping create a quality sense of place. The arts are really a really key piece of creating a quality sense of place for the way people experience their community, the comfort and image of our community, as well as the economic vitality. Because in many respects, what I'm trying to do in the rest of my day job, which is to try to bring employers, employees, businesses, grow the economy of the community, has everything to do with the quality of place, because we're making ourselves into a destination where people want to live, where employers see as a preferred location to be for their employees. And there it is. So implementation, really when it comes down to it, no plan is any good if you don't have any really good implementation steps. So a lot of it is about prioritizing funding between the different city departments that help create that arts experience for the community. But a lot of it also is a process and criteria for commissioning new public art. I've got this roundabout picture. This was just finished in November, new roundabout in town. And that's our current project right now. Is the Arts Commission is working this coming Monday on an RFP to solicit public art. For that, we've got a specific budget from the city, and we're going to be commissioning a new piece of art to go in that roundabout. And that process is quite fun. We talked about the economy. Ultimately, I, as a planning professional, am not just simply trying to promote arts participation, but the arts environment in the community, the ecosystem. I want that to be a supportive place where professional artists can come and be successful. So that it has everything to do with creating an entrepreneurship ecosystem as well. Because in the end, most artists are actually professional. If they're professional artists, are entrepreneurs themselves and trying to run a business. So I want to make sure that they've got the networks and the support, access to capital that they need to be successful professional artists as well. To that end, we've created a new retail incubator space. We're just in the process of a historic renovation of the old courthouse on the square. This is a city-owned property, and we're making some retail incubator spaces available inside that building for those professional artists to come in. The first one that's already signed is called Makety Make. It's a craft studio that's expanding from another community. And then another big study we've got coming up this summer is Art Space. If you haven't heard of them, it's a really fun thing to look into. They're out of Minneapolis. They've got 3 or 4 Chicagoland locations already, but we're evaluating whether Woodstock might be a good location for another. It's a developer that creates affordable housing with live-work studio space inside the building for artists to live and work. So I think I kept to my time, but I'll pass to, I think, is it Henry, are you next? And I will stop sharing the screen here.
Thank you so much, Garrett. And just so everyone knows, if you have questions, we'll have a general Q&A session at the very end, but you're always feel free to leave your note in the chat, and we will make sure to bring it up during that session if you would like. So our next presenter is going to be Toby Sachs, and let me queue up your presentation.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Brian. That's terrific. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to spend an hour with you. Garrett wins because he had more pictures. But I'm a member of the Evanston Arts Council. Evanston, of course, one suburb north of Chicago. And been a member for about 3 years now. And I was the chair of the council for a couple of years until just recently. Now pass that on to much more competent people, but very much still a member of the Arts Council. So Brian, next slide, please. Really just, thanks, Brian. Let's roll on.
Sorry, I'm having a little bit of lag on my side, so
that's okay.
Move.
Okay, well,
we go.
As it comes, it's really just a story, briefly, of some changes we've made, why, how, and the result of them over the last 4 or 5 years. If I go back 5 years now, I would say that the Evanston Arts Council, they had to have some initials there because I know planners like initials. The Evanston Arts Council had a small budget of 80,000 from the city, with which it had a small regranting program to arts organizations within the municipality, and a just scattered public art program, more murals than anything else because they're cheaper than most other forms of public art. It had no focus, and unsurprisingly, it had fairly little impact, although its grants were valued by the local organizations. Thanks, Brian. What we've done is to quite intentionally find some focus over that time. Find some focus over that time. Can't do anything, as I think Garrett said, without resources. We did not see any great upside or light at the end of the tunnel of trying to go after the city for more money. It's a very, very long road to hoe. But we've gone to outside sources, and last year we increased our budget to over 350,000. We've done that partly by being really quite focused and applying one lens, which I'll go into in a second, for everything that we do, trying to find some real sense of purpose. It's given us some traction, and we've got big plans ahead of us. Thanks, Brian. So what changed? Very intentionally, we developed a sense of purpose. Our mission and vision is broader and more florid, but what it comes down to is that we believe our purpose is to advance racial equity, both in and through the arts. It's obviously a hot topic in Evanston, a very diverse community, but still with a very poor history of inequities, which is now being partly addressed by being the first municipality in the country to actually pay reparations to some of the elders of our Black population. So we're very much in line with much broader initiatives in the community. We worked on the people. It's a 12-person council appointed by the mayor, and we made a significant point of really reaching out to very widely disparate group of people who were aligned to this sort of thinking. 50% or more of them at any given time are BIPOC, and getting them to apply for the council and lobbying the mayor as to why we thought they would make good appointments. And both the mayors that we've worked with have been very helpful in that. And then to try and bring the group together and establish common language, we actually did some very specific training together. We found that can be very helpful in advancing this work, and specifically it was training through Enrich Chicago to increase understanding and offer some tactics for working on racial equity, specifically in arts organizations. And that very tight focus to our purpose was extremely helpful for us for bringing the group together. And then, as I mentioned just now, we've sought funds from outside the city to give us some money to work with. We've been quite lucky with applications both to the local university, but Northwestern, but above all to the National Endowment for the Arts, which accounts for over 3/4 of our budget. Oh, yeah, Brian, that's perfect, thanks. So what have we actually got done? Well, last year we were able to go up from previous years of 30,000 to 270,000 in regranting, and applying our new guidelines that we've run for 3 years now, which gives us a very strong focus on issues of equity. 85% of that money goes either to BIPOC organizations and or projects that are serving underserved and underrepresented communities. I'll jump, if I may, to there, I've got one picture. The mural underneath, which is that when the specific proclamation that led to our reparations in Evanston was published, rather than it just languishing in a document in the city files, we we commissioned Ben Blunt, local artist, to do a large scale, as you see, mural there, which is the first few words of the proclamation. His original draft was a little more on the nose about the need for this, and would have been more resonant of your land acknowledgement that I was pleased to see you put the beginning there. Because this is CTA property, they deemed that to be political. Chicago, but we were allowed to do this, and at least it writes some of what we believe up big on the wall, and is starting to sort of make the public art serve a social purpose. Our next initiative, which is well underway now, is we're raising money for a commission for a piece of public art in Fountain Square, that's right in the heart of the city, to honour the Black experience. And we've raised 100,000 for that so far, and we're waiting with bated breath to see if the NEA will match that with matching funds in the Our Town project. We'll hear about that back from the NEA in the next couple of months, so wish us luck, please. And finally, thanks, Brian. Part of what brings us together and gives us energy is to follow Daniel Burnham's exhortation to make no little plans. It's little rather than small, isn't it? Room for the planners, you'll all know better than me. He also said in the, 1909 plan for Chicago, that the lakefront should be free for all. And that's something we're trying to take very literally and make come true in Evanston. And to a couple of different sources, both Northwestern and Bloomberg Philanthropies, we've applied for a total of $1.8 million. It's sort of nicely increased from the 80,000 I was talking about 5 years ago. If we can get that money to make that idea that the lakefront would be free for all really come true in Evanston. What the map is, and I know you can't see it on these screens, but what you can see is a lot of little dots there. And what that shows is the racial and ethnic distribution of population in Evanston. And the yellow dots are white non-Hispanic households, and the colored ones are households of color. And you'll see quite clearly that there's a huge concentration of households of color. They're very largely Black in the 5th ward, right, sort of upper middle of the screen there. And nothing but white households anywhere close to the lake. It's that sort of forcing of particularly the Black population back into the 5th ward that had led to our reparations program. And looking to see, okay, how can the arts address this issue? What we're proposing is a very large scale, but community-driven arts festival, embracing every possible form of cultural, racial, and artistic diversity that would be free for all along the lakefront, specifically at those 9 locations that you see there, including one piece actually out on the water itself, running all the way along the Evanston lakefront from north to south. Now, that's a dream and a plan. No, I think it's a dream at the moment. We have a plan, and it becomes a it starts to become real if the path to money works out for us. So we're waiting to hear back on those grant applications over the next 2 or 3 months. Again, I'll ask you all to keep your fingers crossed for us. But that's the work that we're working on. Look forward to talking about this some more if there are questions about it later in the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Toby. And to bring up the last of our introductions, we have Henry Wishcamper from Bustling Spaces.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see so many familiar names on the Zoom screen. I'm really glad to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thanks to everybody, all the MUPPs who put this together. I know it's a lot of work and really appreciate it. Garrett and Toby, it's fantastic to hear about the work you all are doing in Woodstock and Evanston. Is really exciting. I'm here to talk about some of the work that I'm doing with my new company, which is called Bustling Spaces. We are an arts consultancy that started in January. And we actually haven't officially launched because we don't have a logo or a website, but my email is there, and this is my favorite subject, community art development. So please feel free to reach out if you want to continue the conversation beyond this conversation. Brian, if you go to the next screen. So briefly, my background, I spent about 20 years as a theater director and a nonprofit arts administrator. I was at the Goodman for a little bit over a decade as a member of their artistic collective, and so that's the bulk of my background. I came to the MUPP program based on sort of a pretty significant shift in how I wanted to think about the role that arts play in community. I entered the program right at the start of the pandemic. It was an amazing opportunity to really dig into the ways in which arts development can, as Brian said in the introduction, generate hyper-local economic development, particularly in historically disinvested communities. So I graduated in December and launched this sort of coming right out of it. I live in Hyde Park. And most of my work is on the South Side. So we can go to the next slide. So at Bustling Spaces, we see ourselves as doing two main types of work to support arts in community. The first is strategic fundraising and storytelling support for projects led by artists, community groups, and creative sector businesses. We're currently working with 6 different groups. All of them are based on the South Side. All of them are Black-led. And most of them are groups or individuals who have been working in their communities for a really long time. In some cases, 10, 15 years, who find themselves at a moment of opportunity and are thinking about either building or expanding a space or changing an aspect of their programming or their business plan. And typically they're in a fairly early phase of thinking about that. And we come in and help them think about how to position that strategically, how to identify and find that first major chunk of money to support it, and how to talk about it in the context of their community and the work that they're already doing. The other piece that we do is advocacy, research, and policy support for the art sector broadly. And Brian, if you go to the next slide, I just wanted to take 2 of my 5 minutes to talk about one of the projects that we're supporting. So one of my clients is the Arts Alliance Illinois. And Arts Alliance Illinois has been hired by the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, DCEO, to promote the largest allocation of state money to the arts that we're aware of in the history of Illinois. It's a $50 million COVID recovery for the creative sector. It is open now. You can go and apply now. It will be open through May 10th. It supports nonprofit, for-profit, and sole proprietors working in the arts in these 5 industries: independent live venue operators, performing or presenting arts organizations, and you can see a list of genres and disciplines within that, arts education organizations, museums. These are all public-facing museums statewide, not just arts museums, and cultural heritage organizations. Again, these can be organizations that are supporting or promoting cultural heritage sort of beyond the scope of traditional conceptions of art. Sole proprietors, I think, is particularly important because most artists who work freelance are sole proprietors, and most of them do not think of themselves as sole proprietors. And the most important and amazing thing about this program is that everyone who is eligible will receive funding. We think a lot of people across the state are in fact eligible and will assume that they aren't. So we're really encouraging people to reach out. Arts Alliance has its own help desk that can help people. You do need to have been in operation starting on March 12th, 2020, a day we all remember, and you need to be in operation now. You don't need to have been in operation continuously in between those times, and you need to be able to demonstrate loss of $5,000. So please, Garrett, please, Toby, please, anybody and everybody who has friends who are working in the arts, spread the word. When I'm done presenting, I'm going to drop a couple of resources into the chat, including promotional materials that you can copy and paste and share to social media, including the address to our help desk, and include, I guess, those two. But yeah, it's a really amazing program, and the time is now. So we can go to the next slide. So a couple key points that I just wanted to raise here at the top that ground my work and you know, I think will form the basis of a lot of what I hope to say today. The first is that is just the recognition that the history of arts investment and arts development locally in Chicago and across the country mirrors many of the racist and segregationist policies that we are familiar as you know, being endemic to the field of planning. And if you look at the map, the spatial map of arts resources in the city of Chicago, it looks exactly like the spatial map that you know of every other issue of equity in the city of Chicago. They all look the same, the arts look the same, and the reason is because the priorities guiding decision-making were the same. That said, this is an incredible window of opportunity for community-led arts projects. There is a lot of money right now that is available, particularly from the American Rescue Plan, but there's a lot of money in a lot of places, and a lot of people, whether it's government funders, private foundations, corporations, are rethinking their giving and granting priorities and processes. And I think what's really interesting is that whether you are an arts group or a community group, there are probably new avenues of funding available to you that weren't available a few years ago. So I think there's a lot of money for arts as it connects to economic development. So economic development pots of money that are now prioritizing arts. And there's a lot of arts funding that is really prioritizing communities, particularly historically disinvested communities. So I think everybody has an opportunity to rethink where they're looking for money. And part of what we're trying to do is to help people recognize those changes in the landscape and access the money. So yeah, so I think that the time is now. There's an amazing window for people who have been working in their communities for decades to access a whole new level of support. But these organizations need a ladder to be able to reach the window. And once they go through the window, they need the muscle to be able to succeed on the other side. And so that's where we feel like we come in terms of helping people think about how to get that first big new chunk of money, as well as how to find resources to expand their capacity going forward on the other side. The other thing that I'll just say is I think, and I've heard it a lot actually in the MUPP program and many other places, that arts development is frequently associated with gentrification and displacement. And that is certainly true historically. The arts is an area that has a real dearth of research, and there really is not research to show whether arts development is causally related to gentrification and displacement or whether it's just correlated. I believe that community-led arts development can be an important tool to combat displacement. I think in the South Side, in particular, where you're looking at massive change that is being generated by mega developments like the Obama Center, like the Michael Reese development, by all sorts of powerful forces by Invest Southwest, that getting money into the hands of community and arts groups that have been working in these neighborhoods for decades is an important way for existing residents to be able to sink a cultural and an economic anchor in their homes at a time when these communities are going to change. So I'm a real advocate. I agree completely with what Garrett was saying about the connection between arts and economic development. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity. And if anybody's interested, a real need for research about this question, because I think that there are a lot of assumptions that are really just assumptions. I think that's it for my intro. I'll turn it back to you, Brian. Excited for the conversation.
Well, great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your perspective and since we are getting close to 12:45, I'm going to go ahead and actually initially open it up to the audience. If they have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and add one to our, and get our stimulating conversation going. Want to give all of you a chance to kick in before we add our own questions in. And if you also feel like it, feel free to drop it in the chat. We will include those in the order that they're received. And I guess until we hear something, I guess one question wanted to ask all of you. Sounds like you all are greatly valuing art within your community. We've heard a lot about other communities cutting funding, especially for the arts. Thankfully, sounds like a lot of you all are experiencing almost the opposite in many, many ways. But that sort of segues into the question too about how do you, in your roles, promote art as its own separately important value within the community, and avoid sort of co-opting or utilizing art as a vehicle for other projects that the community might be trying to move forward.
I'm happy to go first. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I think, so first of all, I think there's tremendous new funding. I do think that ongoing sustaining funding is extremely challenging. And I think one of the challenges for the art sector generally is that while the arts are a really important engine for economic development for their areas, often it is the other businesses in the area that really see the economic benefits. And the arts organizations continue to struggle on an ongoing basis. And so I think that there's a real need to make planners understand that the ongoing relationship with the arts in your community needs to be continuously watered, because your restaurants need it, your hotels need it, your tax base is going to grow if the quality of life and quality of place is there, but the arts organizations are going to continue to struggle. The other thing I'll say is that I think that, in a lot of historically disinvested neighborhoods in Chicago, one of the things that you hear a lot in quality of life planning is an acknowledgement that the cultural legacy of the neighborhood is one of its assets. So I think the communities recognize better than planners do the value that arts and culture has for their communities. So I think it's more a matter of amplifying what people in residents and community leaders already know about their community, and just getting the traditional decision makers to recognize that as well.
So I can go next. I think if I understand your question, you were talking about how to make sure that the arts is being promoted independently. But I almost think that my best answer is the best way to promote the arts is to not consider it independently, but to integrate it into everything else that we do. In my experience, it's difficult to get municipal funding directly, as Toby kind of highlighted. It's pretty hard to wring money out of a municipality for the arts. But if we can integrate the expectation of arts into the development process, into the transportation development process, like the art in the roundabouts, for example, if we can codify all of that into the expectations of those developments, then art just becomes a natural part of the rest of the process. So that's where I'm trying to push the arts is behind the scenes into the really boring stuff like building codes and transportation specs and that kind of stuff. So but ultimately it's becoming successful for us.
And all I'd add to that is building on what Henry was saying about there being just at the moment quite a lot of money out there for particularly issues of equity associated with the arts and art money and so on. And to Garrett's point, what we found most effective is to go outside, find some of those federal basis sources of money, some of which involve matching funds. And the strongest argument we can actually bring back to the city is A, we're bringing in a lot more than you're giving us. B, we need the evidence of your support and in some cases the specific match in order to access those funds. At that point, we get a very good hearing from the municipality.
Well, that's excellent. Actually, kind of pulling sort of on all fronts to and making the case that it is a economic, well, it is a net boon for your community to include in its from day one sort of thinking. It sounds like. Okay. So then I guess sounds like Toby, you kind of touched on this a little bit already with how Evanston approaches things. But I guess kind of getting Garrett and Henry, your perspectives, how in your work do you ensure that there's like a representation of the broader community in terms of how the arts are being represented? Like Garrett, you mentioned a little bit about like the incubator space and art space sort of helping to bring some, helping to bring additional options to community members that might not be able to afford a traditional space, for example.
Yeah, so our community, I think one of the main aspects is affordability, where we're trying to get small spaces that are easy and affordable to work in, but also just simply highlighting the cultural differences and aspects that we can. Our Chamber of Commerce, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that, really pushed to begin a what we call the Hispanic Connections, which is a kind of a Latino chamber, as it were, for our community. That's our primary group, I guess, in town. We're about 30% Hispanic approximately in Woodstock. But it's become a real sense of pride for the rest of the community at this point now, because we hold large events. I think our Mexican Independence Day celebration in September last year drew around 10,000 people into the downtown square, which is just about a capacity. It's pretty full for the size of what we had as the venue. But it's that kind of events now that are becoming fairly commonplace in the community in a good way. That it's now just the expectation as we're moving into various layers of decision making that all of those groups are going to be consulted and advised as we're going through that. But even our plan commission, we talked again about building codes and planning. Our plan commission now is getting to be much more diverse, by design, and that's really part of the process for us. Is just as we start to create subgroups and committees and focus groups, just make sure we're reaching out to everybody and making sure that all of the voices are being considered, not just in the surveys or the broad community things, but specifically on those commissions and decision-making bodies, that those voices are being heard in all those aspects.
Yeah, I think for a lot of the organizations that I'm working with, they already have deep connections into the communities, and they have really broad networks, and I think that they have pretty clear sense of what community priorities are. What the challenge for many of them is that their capacity is extremely small. Some of these organizations have one full-time staff person. Sometimes they're bringing on people quickly. So what they don't really have time for at the current moment is intentional community, participated design of what their projects are going to look like. And so one of the things that many of the funding applications that I'm helping people with is looking for is pre-development money to be able to include the community. A lot of these organizations are able to rally the community when they need support, when something is coming quickly in front of some sort of governing body, or they need to get the word out about a particular challenge, they're able to leverage the community, but they don't often have time to sit down and have facilitated charrettes that really sort of gather concrete specific information. And I do think that one area, and I'll stop soon, one area where funding is changing for the better is that I think funders are recognizing the importance of general operating funds for arts organizations. I do think that funders could benefit the groups that I work with by prioritizing pre-development money, which continues to be a real hurdle for groups to reach, and I think keeps a distance between community and community groups.
Just because we talked about the appeal of acronyms, I'll give you one for those who don't know it, which just comes straight off Henry's last point there. Vu Lee, one of my favorite pundits on arts funding, talks about my God, which is multi-year general operating dollars, things that we don't often see, but we bow down to when we do.
What would be a planning discussion without another acronym introduced here and there, right? Okay. Did anybody in the audience want to ask a question of our panelists? I have enabled raising your hand if you'd like to notify us that way.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Where do you foresee the future intersections of art and planning being? This is an open question. Like, as planning evolves, as cities evolve, as legislation evolves, where do you see that going, and where do you see the role of art in that as well, especially as communities start vastly changing and diversifying?
Well, I'll just jump in briefly. I think both our other two panelists are better qualified than I, but I was really excited to see Garrett on the panel coming from economic development with art actually reporting into him. And that's something that I'm seeing more and more of around the country. And I think it is an enormously helpful step towards this holistic view of art as a part of an active plan, as opposed to as a cost and a luxury, which is sort of the old-fashioned point of view.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Each of the different city departments that I talked about that are primarily promoting the arts, so your local libraries, your community, parks districts, those kind of things. Most of the time, those are not money makers for communities; those are expenses, but they do it because it is creating that quality of place. And especially in a suburban situation like Chicago, there's a tremendous competition of quality of place between communities, and everybody's trying to one up each other. It's hilarious to be in a room full of mayors when I get the opportunity, and then just all telling these stories and trying to one up each other on how awesome their communities are. But the arts and planning in that sense are so connected, because we're each of us as planners trying to make the places that are within our scope the best possible places to live, and the arts is a key piece of making those places excellent places to live.
I agree completely. I will say, in addition to that, I think, particularly given the concentration of transportation planners in the program, that one of the things that the arts really offer to planners is as an engine of creating density. And I think that as cities and communities look to re-densify and to recreate walkability, that the arts are a really useful way to gather people together, and then all the benefits that come from that. And I think it's really interesting that with all the conversation of equitable transit-oriented development, that really that's all housing or sort of traditional multi-use development, and I think that planners can more prioritize the role that arts can play in sort of creating the goals of Itaagi.
Thank you so much. Those are all great answers. I appreciate it. Thank you for being here as well.
So I think Jenna actually posed a good question in our chat. If any of our panelists, do you have questions for each other, given your different roles from internal planner to community community member to private entity, how each of you sort of engage things, if there's anything that's prompted a curiosity.
I don't think the message is a question specifically, but I'll definitely be looking into some of the endowment options that Toby talked about, as well as some of the grants that Henry recommended, because we're always looking for funding to do what we do. But right now, our Arts Commission is really entirely a city function only, and we really need to we'll talk about how to expand that out a little bit farther. So I really appreciate the insights so far. Thank you very much.
Again, a comment rather than a question. I was excited to see Henry talking about the B2B grants that have just opened up, as I was working on one only this morning. If I have questions, Henry, I'll come to you.
Please do. Yeah, I mean, mine is more a comment too, which is just it's amazing to see what you all are doing in your communities. I'd love to come out and visit and learn more. I think it's fantastic, Toby, that you all are working on an Our Town grant. I think that maybe you could just speak a little bit more about what that is and how it's structured, because I do think it's a really interesting opportunity for planners.
Yeah, that's a great point, Henry. This is the first one I've been involved with, but it's an annual program of the National Endowment for the Arts, with funds specifically put aside for placemaking, and with the emphasis towards placemaking with some sort of social purpose. It needs some seed money, but the opportunity for the match can be quite considerable. I think the limit is 100% one-to-one match. Henry, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's so interesting about the grant is that the grant requires two partners, one of which is an arts organization and one of which is a municipal department. It can be any municipal department, but you need to go in with a municipal department. And I think that's, and you're supposed to sort of identify the problem together that you hope that the project is going to solve. And I think that what you guys are planning with the Free Beach for All is an amazing example of that. So best of luck with it.
All right. Well, and I see that we have unfortunately hit time for today's panel. Really appreciate all of you coming out today to hear about arts and design, as well as our panelists to provide their excellent perspective from their communities. We've really appreciated your insight. It is immeasurable, and we greatly thank you for your time today. I'm going to kick this over to Jenna for just some closing remarks, and I guess a reminder about our next panel at 1:30.
Yeah, you nailed it. Thank you. Thank you to our esteemed panel. Super insightful. Please give them some love in the chat. Feel free to come off mic as well. Just a heads up, we are going to leave the Zoom open. Our next panel, led by SBUP, is Politics and Activism, with some really incredible panelists. You won't want to miss it. Feel free to stick around in the Zoom or leave and come back in a half an hour, grab a snack, grab your second cup of coffee, and we'll see you soon. Feel free to stick around and chat as well. Thank you so much.
welcome to the Politics and Activism panel for the 2023 Urban Innovation Symposium, hosted by the Society of Black Urban Planners. My name's Hailey Sanders, and I'm a member of the executive board for the Society of Urban Planners, Society of Black Urban Planners. And I'm excited to be facilitating this panel along with our treasurer, Ryan Fulgham, and to dive into this conversation with our amazing panel of speakers, exploring the ways politics, activism, and planning intersect. Next slide. So first, I just wanted to get into our community guidelines for the event. Our first one is to create circles, not lines. And this actually comes from the Black Space Manifesto, shared with us by one of our panelists, actually, Bweza Itaagi. And this just means we're not here to create a hierarchy or to put one above the other. And we're really just trying to encourage a dialogue between our panelists and between our audience and panelists. We would also like if you could keep yourself muted unless you're asking a question during our Q&A session. And if you could avoid tone policing as well. So just addressing the questions and not necessarily addressing the way someone has answered the question. And if possible, please have your video on when you're asking questions or engaging with the panelists. And we would like if you could use active listening and listening with love and humble listening. And if you could challenge the idea and not the person, and be open to making mistakes. We all make mistakes, and we really just want to have a very open discussion with everyone. And if you don't understand any jargon, if you could just signal that in the chat by putting question marks, we'll have someone respond to you with a definition or an explanation. Next slide. So before we dive into our discussion, I wanted to give a brief description of our panel topic. And so the Politics and Activism panel brings together scholars, policymakers, practitioners, and activists who are actively involved in creating equitable and sustainable urban environments for communities of color throughout Chicago and for all Chicago. And we're very proud to feature our fantastic panelists, Katanya, Raby, Angela Clay, and Bweza Itaagi. Next slide. And each of our panelists are engaged in a myriad of just transformative work throughout the city, but I'll keep their bios brief so we can have more time for our conversation. Katanya Raby is a planner, activist, artist, and a MUPP and MCD alum, as well as co-founder of the Society of Black Urban Planners. She is currently the Vice President of Planning and Development for the Far South Community Development Corporation. Angela Clay is an Alderperson-elect for the 46th Ward of Chicago, a community organizer, and a lifelong resident of the Uptown neighborhood on Chicago's North Side. She was also the youngest ever president of Voice of the People Uptown, a 51-year-old affordable housing nonprofit on the 46th Ward. And Bweza Itaagi is an urban farmer, community cultivator, and horticulturalist. She stewards the Englewood Nature Trail with Grow Greater Englewood and is the co-founder of Sistas in the Village Farm. So I want to thank all our panelists for joining us today, and I just want to give a brief rundown of how the panel will go. So while some of our questions may be directed towards specific panelists, everyone is welcome to respond and share their opinions, and we just want to encourage everyone, we want to encourage us to be as conversational as possible. And we also have one of our members, Jared Rhymes, monitoring the chat for any questions regarding jargon definitions, as well as looking out for questions to ask during the audience Q&A session. And so the first question we just want to begin with is just what activism means to you and how you all first got involved in activism. And that's for any of our panelists to go ahead and start with.
All right, I'm doing it. Good afternoon, you all. Happy Good Friday if you observe. Happy we are almost out of snow. I am Angela Clay, and activism to me, I truly believe just means power in motion. I believe that it means that you are actively engaging with people who have firsthand experience or knowledge of an issue and asking them to be a part of the solution. I think activism really includes just a breadth of experience and knowledge coming to the tables of power and saying enough is enough. You know, activism can look like so many different things, and I think that's the beauty of it. But at the core of everything that we do, it has to make sure that we are being inclusive and that we are really trying to reach the people who are being most impacted by it. I first got involved with activism in high school. If you are a Chicago public school student, you know that our school lunches, Lord, are horrible, right? And so a group of us were like, where's the salads? Where's the water? You know, we don't want just spicy chicken sandwiches and nachos. And so having that experience with organizing people who were directly impacted, going to the higher ups, even going all the way up to the vendor chain and saying, hey, we know you got a secret menu back there, share it with us. That was my first taste of activism. And then I started a cohort called Voices of Youth in Chicago Education that brought together over 17 high schools in the city to address the dropout rate in Chicago public schools. Because again, as young people, we were tired of the federal government coming in and telling us why we were failing and why were we not succeeding. And we said, you're not talking to us. Are you looking at the classroom environment? Are you looking at our commute? Are you looking at if we ate the day before and we are coming into a classroom just looking for attention? And so for 3 years, we traveled the entire country, studied great teaching skills, studied the curriculum that we were putting in front of our young people, and then came back and put together a proposal that Chicago Public Schools still uses to this day to curb the dropout rate. So that was my very first taste of just putting everybody that needed to be at the table in communication and then coming up with a plan. So activism is in all of our blood.
Thank you for sharing. Katanya or Bweza, would you like to go next?
I had a hard time unmuting my phone. Sorry.
No problem.
But yeah, speaking of activism in the blood, I am a descendant of quite the activist, and my grandfather, Raby, spent a considerable portion of his life fighting for our communities. And although I was young, you know, by the time he passed away, I didn't get a chance to like see it actually happening. But learning about it was huge for me as a young person. Learning about that work, and then people coming up to me because of the name relationship. You know, Raby isn't a name that you see often, so people, you know, would approach me and ask me if I was related to him, and you know, I kind of avoided trying to be in that space because it was weird that people just approach me because of my name. But then eventually I realized like there's a space for me that I need to be in, you know, and I didn't really get into activist work maybe until I got to college. High school, I was kind of like, you know, your typical teenager. I didn't really get into that. I didn't like our school lunches, but I didn't really know who to talk to about it, so I didn't worry about it. But when I got into college and started learning about a lot of things that we didn't really get a chance to learn about in high school, about inequities and just really paying attention to things in a different kind of way and applying that to spaces as I was moving through. I was traveling from, you know, the south side to the north side and seeing the differences in the communities. I started gaining the vocabulary and the words around like how to describe the things that I was seeing and how I could actually start taking some of the teachings from school and building on that and started to galvanize people around those issues. I really got a lot more deep into the activism space when I came to Cuppa Hall. And that was because, the nature of planning, you know, there's a lot of tension in the planning realm, but then you add the impact of racist policies on planning. And I'm going to say it because a lot of people won't, but planning is inherently racist. And there's a lot of shifting that needs to happen. And as I was learning about what all these white guys did in the past and how, you know, it helped the function of a city to get better, it didn't necessarily help all of the people. It wasn't truly inclusive. It still isn't inclusive. Zoning is the worst. So like I started to find my activism space in that realm. And started to the energy that I believe exists in me through my grandfather kind of really showed up when I became a planner. And now I can't get away from it. There is no way. So that's how I got into the activist space.
Thank you. And Bweza?
I am just going to echo something that both Angela and Katanya touched on, which is that activism is in all of our blood as Black people in America. We all are standing on the shoulders of incredible people who have risked their lives and fought and pushed for us to just be where we are now. And it's our responsibility to keep pushing and keep pushing so that we can finally reach the point where we can thrive and shine in this country. So that's the foundation. That's how I came into this activism space. And for me, my activism started young. I'll honestly give credit to my mom. My mom was always the person who would remind me, if you see something that's not working the way you think it should work, what are you going to do? How are you going to change it? And in elementary school, I remember, and this, you know, shows my point in age. In elementary school, I remember protesting the war in Iraq. I was like, why are we going to war? I didn't even understand really the concept of war, but I was like, this just feels wrong. And my mom was like, what are you going to do about it? I was like, I don't know. I want to say something. So me and my younger sister, we made our little signs, made posters, stood on some corner somewhere in Western Denver. I grew up in Colorado. And we were like, we're protesting this war. And that was really the start of me knowing that I'm going to do whatever I can, regardless of how small it is, to use my voice and say when things are wrong. And that's how I've just operated in all spaces. And in my education, I went to a lot of predominantly white institutions and was used to being the one vocal Black girl in the class. And that was me. And that's something that I really do take as a responsibility of me continuing that legacy of all of the people who have worked so hard before me. I cannot let myself be comfortable. I'm always thinking, this is good, but what can I do to make it better for me, for my community, and for just all of us Black folks in this country at large? So yeah, and I really think activism is such a crucial part of life. And it looks different in different places for different people. And that's the piece too. Like we don't necessarily all need to be the ones protesting or putting our bodies at the front line to be activists. That there are so many layers and so many ways that we can get involved and use our voice.
Thank you. That was amazing to hear. Thank you all for sharing. And I think some of the things I grabbed when everyone was speaking is just that activism can look different and it involves so many different aspects. And just kind of how through all of you all's experiences, you came to activism and it kind of starting off being, you know, in your blood, like you were called for this. And I do agree, like as Black people, I can see that for us, the ability to keep change moving forward and the ability to see that if something is wrong, you will fix it. So I appreciate you all sharing that. And I do remember those school lunches. I remember the chicken sandwiches specifically, so I could relate to that. And moving to our next question, actually pulling from something Katanya that you spoke on, is just, you know, planning being inherently racist. Our next question is kind of what you all see the relationship between planning and politics being, and what role community activism plays in that relationship. So Katanya, if you'd like to start off with that question.
Could you say the question for me one more time? I just want to make sure that I fully grasp.
Definitely. What is the relationship between politics and planning, and what role does community activism play in that relationship?
Okay. Well, all of those things, it's like a puzzle. If you don't have the pieces, you won't be able to like have a full, clear picture. When it comes to community activism, I don't feel like communities of color, because we've been the victim of disinvestment for decades. I don't feel like communities of color would get things done if we weren't activists in our own space. Like we wouldn't, like I feel like a lot of the planning work that has been done is tactical. It's people coming together to figure out how to make stuff work because the city won't do it for them. And then when you are getting services from the city, it is a political game. Sometimes you have to be savvy in that space, and it's about who you know in order to gain access to whatever these resources that should just be by right. We're all paying taxes. We shouldn't have to fight to get basic city services done. And so I think that there's definitely a very tight relationship across all of those areas. And as planners, I think city planners are in a space of being more mindful of these things. I think that there's a long way to go, but I think that in more recent years, at least over the last decade, city planners have been really thinking about how to better connect with the policymakers, how to better connect with communities, how to better engage with communities. And I think engagement really took a jump up after the 2020 uprisings. People are tired. People are weary. And I think that the uprising showed that it was a really unfortunate way for these things to have a spotlight put on. But I think that there's a shift in those dynamics. And I'm not saying that it's fixed or that planning has made its way and it is fully equitable and people are doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. But I think that there's more attention on it and that there's more check marks or benchmarks that are being put in place to ensure that those entities are coming together in a better way to make planning more effective in communities like the ones that we live in.
I appreciate this question because it's very, very relevant to the work that I'm doing with Grow Greater Englewood. So we are a community organization, a nonprofit based in Englewood, focused on Englewood, West Englewood neighborhoods. And our focus is on pushing the city and reminding the city that they have an obligation to the residents of Englewood to make sure that people have the things that they need to survive, but more so to live abundantly. And we have to remember that we're in a democracy, technically, and every person in a political office is elected by the people, therefore they have an obligation to serve those people. And sometimes we forget that, or we don't necessarily know how to use our position to really push for things. So within our work, as I'll say GGE, when I refer to Grow Greater Englewood, we are in the process of doing community education to remind everyone, these are tools that you have available. These are ways that you can connect with your alder people or the mayor or the governor. And it's your right to do so, especially when we're in a situation where we have been experienced disinvestment for so long. So part of our work is to really find that intersection, I guess the sweet spot between politics, community, and activism, because I'm personally not one to speak the political talk. I don't care about that. My focus is on making sure my community is cared for. But you do have to have part of the politics in order to connect with that. Like Katanya said, this city is all about who do you know? And that's unfortunately how a lot of those resources are distributed. So it requires a lot of showing face and introducing yourself and talking to people. And that, if that's the way that we have to go about advocating for our communities, then we will do so. But it's really important for people to remember that we all have the ability to advocate for things that we need. But it's just a matter of having that basic training of knowing how to go about that. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't have that information.
Yeah, that sounds about my life right now. This is part of the real reason that I got involved in politics was because one, didn't see people that look like me to represent my values and my morals. I also didn't trust them. The people that were in there, I didn't feel like they actually cared enough to come and listen to the people to get involved or to get the services that we have at the city down to the neighbors who need them the most. And you know, when we talk about politics and planning, these are two of the biggest rooms that we've historically been locked out of, that we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. We only see the after effects when it impacts us, when we are closing 50 schools, when we are, you know, closing down mental health clinics. And now we have, you know, an uptick in things happening on the red line, you know? And so I feel like politics and planning have to include community, and that is a form of activism. Like, you have to go and talk to the people who live this every single day. Not only do you have to talk to them, but you have to build a trust between you and them so that they actually believe that you're going to take their values to the seat of power. Politics is a game about what you know and who you know. But what we are doing in 2023, and something that I'm extremely proud of my campaign for doing, is we are being extremely transparent and we are being intentional, right? My ward is the most diverse ward in the entire city of Chicago, but we had people who English is not their first language. And so we had to translate our material. We had to go and get translators to go out on doors with us so that they could see, this is how we are moving together, neighbor. It doesn't matter if you don't speak English. You can't be left out of this process. I went and I tagged my young people and I said, hey, look, you see, 4 years is no time. It will go by in a blink of an eye. How can I engage you in this process and bring you into the fold that we live in? Our communities thrive when we all work together. But if we don't plan our communities together, trust and believe somebody else is planning it for us. And so, you know, especially in a community like a lot of ours that are gentrifying by the millisecond, that are just bringing in outside voices and big money, I'm extremely ecstatic that our campaign in our community was so grassroots that we went up against big name developers, the governor. Love you, Governor Pritzker, okay? But we're gonna have to talk after this, because it proved that you have to listen to the people. You can't just throw, you know, a dollar sign on our heads and act like that is what's going to make us jump. No, you must include us. And planning is so crucial, especially in a city like Chicago, because there's no there's no mistake that we are still one of the biggest segregated major cities on the planet. That's by design. So it again goes back to planning for who and who am I going to actually trust to plan on my best behalf? So I think all of this is, again, like both of the ladies before me said, it's an ecosystem, but at the core of that, activism is always going to be a part of it.
Thank you. And just like snaps for everything you all said, because honestly, I think that's something, having been at UIC as well, I've been learning the vocabulary to express like what I've been seeing as a lifelong Chicago resident, and just that this is by design, and communities of color have been locked out of these rooms. And going back to finding that sweet spot between these different approaches, planning, activism, and politics, is just that I think the activism piece is the way for marginalized communities to maneuver in these spaces, and to get their voices heard. So definitely appreciate you all's insights. Our next question is how community development is sometimes seen as the realization of community organizing goals, kind of in the form of physical development and other tangible activities. And as organizing efforts turn into development work, does this process become more formalized? And do you all think concessions have to be made in an effort to gain tangible results? I'll have Angela start off for us.
Yeah, so community development, again, it goes back to for whom. And I feel like at all levels, we just have to keep that in mind, because you will have block clubs, right? Who are like, I don't want this, but it could be in the best interest of the entire ward. And again, you have to stand firm and say, okay, we have to work together for every single neighbor and not just making it about one specific group. And community development really does take honest conversations, you all. It cannot just be, yes, this looks nice. And yes, I've always wanted an ice cream shop on this corner. No, you have to think about the longevity of what you are doing. And so I definitely think that you have to just be, again, intentional. I don't know if formalize is the word that I would use, but intentional about really making sure that voices are not being overpowered. Because people will try to use the formalized, oh, I go to CAPS meetings, or, oh, I went to the block club meetings. And so my voice, it should be the loudest in the room because I'm there. And that, honestly, in my book, doesn't mean anything. It means that, have you been here putting in the work? Have you been trying to engage with other neighbors? Have you been trying to bring everybody that you possibly know to this seat? And that's where I think community development thrives, is, again, when you are able to be honest and intentional with everyone and say, hey, you all, okay, this in the next 4 years are our goals. The common goals are always there, right? Safe, affordable, vibrant communities. So how do we get there? And we can't just, power and money, you all, I don't have to tell you, is everywhere in this city. And so at all angles, you have to be prepared so that you're not infiltrated by power and big voices. So when we are coming together to plan, we know, hey, yes, I've talked to neighbors who are houseless. I've talked to neighbors who are on fixed incomes. I've talked to neighbors who may not have a high school diploma. And I've talked to engineers. I've talked to, med students. I've gone all the way up the food chain and really, solidified those plans together. So community development is something that has to be fluid. I don't like the, official, this is the one meeting and this is the meeting. Like, no, if we need to have multiple means, we need to have multiple styles of communications. We have to do that in order to get a full scope of how to plan our communities.
I can answer this with a very specific real-time example. So GGE has been working on conceptualizing how to reuse a vacant rail corridor in Englewood that goes, it's between 59th and 58th, from more or less Halsted to Damon. We've been thinking about this for years, about how can we repurpose this space in a way that addresses the many ongoing needs of our community. And we, for years, have been having conversations with neighbors, asking them how they utilize the space, if they do, what they would want to see on that space, and how we as an organization can amplify their voices. We, for years, have been telling the city this is a huge issue in our community because the rail line that's sitting empty and vacant has a lot of contamination that's just seeping into the soil, affecting the air quality. This is a public health issue. How can we move this forward? And we were for years told that there wasn't a budget for it, or that it wasn't a current priority, but thank you for your effort, keep it up. And we just kept keeping it up. And finally, last year, we started to receive funding for this project. Finally, it became a priority, and the city heard our loud voices and was like, okay, we need to do something. But that put us in a very vulnerable situation, because to the point of the question, when community organizing finally gets funding, and especially when that funding comes from government agencies, like we received some funding from the Biden administration, some from Mayor Lightfoot's administration, it opens the door for all of them to come in and make it their project. So we have been the protectors, and we've had to be very firm and very blunt in saying, thank you all for this funding, but let's remind you, this is a community-driven project, and this is for Englewood community. You have to sit and listen to the experts being the residents, and they will tell you what they want, and you have to implement that. And it's a constant struggle because I'm saying they, but all city departments have been like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. But you see that they're trying to just check the box and keep moving and kind of sidestep us. And we're like, no, you're not sidestepping us, because this is our responsibility to make sure that a project of this scale is not displacing people, but is more so adding ownership, community ownership into this. And we want to have an example that does not exist so far to say, this is how Black community members can plan Black spaces. This is true community planning. But it's a struggle. It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of fighting. And at this point, we're in the press photo op mode. Governor Pritzker was on the trail this morning, taking all the pics. I mean, shout out to Pritzker, but also okay, let's see the work. Let's see the support. And that's a big struggle, but it does, to me, I feel very committed to this because it has been such a long journey, and we have to make sure that we see this through and don't allow space for the city to just make it a cute cement paved path. That's not going to happen. Oh, I'm sorry. So I'll say concessions can be made, but I want to make as few as possible, as few concessions as possible.
Yeah, you both said a word. I was over here feeling like I was in church, because everything that you all said was on point. And I feel like I've seen the interesting thing from my point of view is that I've seen it across multiple types of planning initiatives, from the state, from the city, being in the space of the state, being in the space of the city, and now being in a community-based organization. And concessions have to be made across all of those spaces. But I can say that my experience when working for the government, trying to negotiate terms with a community, and knowing that, for my own personal connections to communities like these, like knowing that I want to see this community in the way that the community wants to see it, but having to fight the people who employ me was a real challenge. It's hard because, you know, being a lot of times being the only Black person on a staff that is fighting for a community that I might not live in, but those folks look like me. So I know that they've experienced some similar things that the community I'm from has experienced. So I want, like, it's something deep within me that's like, I want to fight for these people. I want to make sure that the things that they are really in need of and that they desire happen. And it is so incredibly difficult to be that person, to stand up against the powers that be. And sometimes you get shot down. Sometimes you know, when you're the only one, you know, and I find myself, and I don't want to incriminate myself, but I find myself in those spaces connecting with community members kind of like in the background, like when my employer might not see what's going on, right? Because I know that these conversations need to be held. I know that their concerns and their, you know, wants need to be communicated. So outside of the whatever meetings might have been formally set up, I'll reach out so that I can hear directly from people. And it's a weird space to be in because I could get in trouble, but I feel like it's necessary. I feel like there's so many situations where you don't have an advocate on the inside. And these developers and the government and, you know, the people that are holding the purse strings will bulldoze right through. You know, to Bweza's point about, like, you know, everybody looking for opportunity. You know, it's probably best that I don't share a lot of the things that I would love to share right now with you. But there are certain situations that I've seen, like, where people have capitalized on opportunities that they didn't even develop. They didn't have anything to do with it. So many, it happens so much, and it's really disgusting. And I will say that I am grateful that I had those opportunities to work in those different spaces so that now I know how it works on the inside. Now that I'm not on the inside anymore, I know how to navigate it from a space where that is community led. And I can help break down some of those walls and force some of those concessions because I kind of know how it works and I know some of those people that are part of this machine. But yeah, I'm gonna stop there because then I might say some things that I shouldn't. But
yeah, amazing. Thank you all for sharing again. And I think just pulling from what you all said, the intention, the passion, and the commitment to keep community development and community organizing work within the community is an important and tireless effort. And I thank you all for that. And I would like to pass it to Ryan now to ask our remaining questions. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Hailey, and thank you for our panelists again. My name is Ryan Fulgham. I am the treasurer of the Society of Black Urban Planners. And I just also want to second what everybody else has been saying. It really does seem to be difficult to maintain your core values and your vision and avoid, as I remember Bweza was talking about earlier, avoid some of your biggest goals just becoming like vanity projects for other people. So I appreciate everybody's insight on that. I would like to move on into our fourth question right now, which is that we recently passed the 3-year anniversary of the pandemic spread across the United States. And the weeks and months that followed saw some of the largest social and political challenges in American history, as well as some of the strongest defiances to systemic injustices. I heard a word mentioned earlier, uprisings, which I feel like kind of sums it up nicely. So our question is, what lessons have you learned in your roles as activists since then? And what kind of changes have you seen in the communities and spaces that you work in? And I'll leave this one to whoever wants to take it first.
I guess I can kick it off because I did a lot of work that I didn't expect to do, activism work during that time frame. At the time I was living in Bronzeville, and a lot of, my neighbors, we were suffering. Everybody across the city, was suffering because we, didn't have access to grocery, after all of, those things were going on. And so it was a lot of work to kind of like support the community. And I worked with two really good friends to lift up a food network. So we were like connecting with a variety of donors that would ship like large pallets of food and toiletries and other basic necessities to a vacant school in Bronzeville. And we was, we gathered a large team of folks to help distribute those items. And so I feel like in 2020, it brought the world together in a way that I don't think we ever really expected. Of course, COVID was terrible. It still exists, it's terrible, but it's interesting how those kinds of events will bring people together that you would never expect to be together. And I feel like just in terms of like the planning profession, like it really highlighted so many inequities that we weren't really paying, like people that are experiencing them know them. But the people who are, supposed to be doing the work to, make things more equitable just didn't see it until 2020 happened. And so I feel like there's been a shift in the way that we even think about these things. Now we're doing racial equity impact assessments. I'm trained in doing those assessments. I've done them for the city, did them for the Department of Housing's, the process through which developers access tax credits for low-income housing. Like there's a lot of energy going into racial equity work, but I think time is going to tell us the impact. Like I really am skeptical because I don't know if while we've gone through all of these things, I also am noticing that we aren't, like people are getting tired or what's a better way to say it? People are fatigued with racial equity stuff. Like they don't want to hear about it anymore. People just want to shut it down. And so this is work that can't ever stop. And I feel like I'm now spiraling because I'm getting away from the original question. But these are just kind of some of my thinkings about like what 2020, like it brought out a lot of good, but it's also highlighting a lot of the ugly. And I think we still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, as a COVID mama, one of the first 50 women in the state to give birth when the entire world shut down, isolated, completely cut off from access, good health care, you name it, the horrible, traumatic birth experience that Black women share for some reason in 2023, 2020. I felt like 2020 gave everyone a taste of inner city living, poverty, lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to mental health resources. Like it really gave people a bird's eye view of what people have been dealing with for generations. And for me, I felt like people just became fake woke. Is that the term that we have? because this isn't just something, like 2020 just unearthed what has been brewing for eons, when we don't prioritize our neighbors that are at the bottom of the totem pole, I promise you it will work its way up. And that's what COVID showed everybody. And so for me, it was, okay, how long is this momentum really going to last? Because this can't just be a moment. It is not a moment for a lot of us. I was really hopeful at the way that a lot of us as neighbors just hopped to each other's rescue, right? We didn't wait for the government. We had no time to wait for the government. Historically, like in a lot of urban areas in our community, like we don't have time. We need to act because people's lives depend on it. And much like you, Katanya, we partner with Food Not Bombs for 3 years now. Every single Wednesday we do mutual aid, give away free food, free PPE. And this can't just stop. Like this just doesn't stop because COVID is over or wherever we are in this world right now. People still need access to these resources. And it's crazy that it took an entire global pandemic for us to think about using the McCormick place to house homeless people. Like, what? What do you mean? We could have been thinking about this. We could have been thinking outside of the box. Honestly, the things that COVID unearthed for me were just, we can really do this. And the city has the resources to get it done. Why have we not thought about how to make this long term? Why have we not thought about making this sustainable so that after COVID, people still have the quality of care that they deserve? And so I think for me, it made me reimagine how we show up for each other. It made me reimagine the things that are possible. It's crazy that, again, during a global pandemic, people were actually able to maintain themselves with extra, food stamps or extra unemployment, just basic quality of life, things that they need every single day outside of a pandemic. We were able to meet their needs. And I feel like all of us are in a moment of what next? How do we continue to build people's quality of life? Because it can't, again, just be these instances where we're activated and it's cliche or it's cute to be, at a protest or to do good. Like, no, this is continuation. This work is constant. And so I definitely think 2020 just ripped a Band-Aid off of a very deep gash for a lot of us to say, look, if you're not treating this wound, it's going to become infected. And I think right now we just have to continue with that momentum to say, how are we taking care of each other?
Oh, y'all said it all, really. I have so many thoughts, but I really agree and echo that the pandemic highlighted all of the inequities, really brought them under a microscope, because all of those inequities were already happening. We were just existing within them. And then it's as if something stopped, like time warped, and we're like, wait, no, this is not sustainable. What are we going to do about it as activists, as community members? And in my world, my focus has been on food access. And my soul sister business partner, Mecca, is on the call, I think. She's in the audience somewhere. And she and I, pre-pandemic, had been working on more of the advocacy side as far as making sure our communities had the resources to connect them to fresh and local food. But once the pandemic happened, early 2020, she and I both had this moment of like, damn, we need to grow food. We need to be the ones to grow the food, because we saw how the food supply chain was disrupted. All of the semi trucks that were transporting food from across the country weren't transporting food. And we had our grocery stores, Southside, were empty and were being looted, because also like, yes, take the stuff, like take what you need. That's how it should be. But it made me very aware of how we needed to have some type of cushion, emergency food supply. And of course, growing food is a long process. We knew we weren't about to plant seeds in May and have food in May, but we said this is something that we need to really strategize and organize around. And that's how Sistas in the Village came to be. We're now in our fourth season of growing food. Time, I don't know. I can't tell you how long it's been. And for us, we really want to make sure that we're sharing the knowledge of how to grow food and reminding everyone that you can grow on any scale, whether you have a little windowsill, whether you have a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket, third year, thanks, Mecca. Whether you have a backyard, whatever space you have, you can grow food should you choose to. And now we're in the planning space of making sure that we're then showing how do you save, preserve, can the food so that we can have emergency food backup, because this pandemic will not be the last. It will not be the last. And all of the issues in this country are just bubbling up to the surface. And we're in the middle of climate change 5.0. So we do have to be prepared and make sure that we, as community members, are looking out for each other and are trying to find solutions to our problems ourselves, because we know we can't rely on the people with the power to look out for us. And that's where my mind is. You know, we have to make sure that we have people focusing on the different sectors, because the work is a lot. I know I can't do everything, so let me focus on the food part. And I know others will focus on making sure folks have other just basic household supplies with mutual aid, and others will focus on the healthcare piece. Like, that's how we collectively work together to make sure that in these pandemics, in these times of emergency and disaster, we are prepared.
All right, thank you all so much for that. It's very cool to hear how everybody here buckled down immediately when the pandemic started, helping to provide food, toiletries, and other necessities. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone here for keeping up the pressure on the city and making sure that they don't get lax with that response that they did early on. So I would like to then ask our last question. So the idea of having champions within political institutions has been viewed as a way for community-centered strategies to be prioritized in legislation and policy. So for example, Commissioner Navarro's introduction of the racial equity impact assessment, like Katanya was speaking on earlier. As well as Anika Anzarike, I always forget how to say her name exactly, as the lead for the city's community wealth building initiative. So our question is, what are your thoughts on the idea of having champions? Are there any other methods of ensuring policies and projects consider equitable neighborhood development? And I suppose since we did bring up the racial equity impact assessment, if Katanya, because I know that she played a big part in that, if you want to start us off, I appreciate that.
Sure. Can you repeat the question? The last part of the actual question. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on the idea of having champions, right? So sort of upholding these individuals as leaders of progressing movements, right? Are there any other methods of ensuring that policies and projects consider equitable neighborhood development?
Okay. I think that having champions for anything is, I mean, you're going to have to, like, you can't do anything in a vacuum. You can't expect to be able to get the type of support that you need without having someone that is going to help kind of like push it forward with you. I think that making sure when it comes to doing community work or even policy work that is specific to a community, you have to know who those champions are. Like, you can't just go in there and just assume and just like, oh, well, I'm just gonna get a list of all the captains of the Black Club. Like, it doesn't stop there. And I think that's part of the issues with a lot of these policies that are developed, is that the time that is necessary to get to know the community and the people who are able to kind of like bring people together so that they can learn more about what you are intending on doing. There's not enough time spent. Like, it's I think Angela mentioned earlier, like, you know, checking the boxes and, you know, kind of like moving through a process instead of putting the people first. And it's people over process. I can't remember who said that. I want to say Candace Moore in the over the Office of Racial Equity and Justice in the mayor's office. I believe she might have said that. And that's really important to keep in mind, because you can't think that you can just create something without having those people in place, and they will not champion you. Chicago don't play. We're talking about specifically Chicago. Chicago will shut something down in a heartbeat. And I think the life of the administration sees, and there's a certain way that you have to be intentional about how you connect with people if you're looking to get something done. And I think that it comes with an authentic approach. You're not having a one-off, hey, come to this community meeting. It's actually being there or connecting with the people who are regularly there in a way that they can help relate. Like, it's impossible to meet with everybody. You'll never be able to do that. But who are you connecting with that can help get your messaging out, and not just get the messaging out, but get the information back to you? Because if you're just sending out information and you're not receiving any, you're not listening to what people are saying, that's problematic. And I don't want you to be part of anything I got going on, because I need to be able to hear what people are saying and know, like, not just hear it, but revisit it. If a concern comes up and it's, you're not going back to the source to kind of understand what is happening with that issue, then you're just brushing it off. Like, you can't, I see so many books of documents just showing where people have documented issues, but they've never followed up. Can't have follow-up issues. Anyway, I'll pass it on to somebody else.
I can go next. I think I'm just struggling with the word champion. It feels too individualistic. I try to have a community mindset. And I do acknowledge that it is crucial to have those individuals who are for the community in these larger institutions to really push things forward. Both are true. I wish it didn't have to be that way, honestly. I wish it didn't have to be like, let me talk to the one person in the mayor's office who I know here's what we're saying and here's it the way that we're saying it. It's disappointing. And I feel that we're gradually shifting. Chicago, like Katanya said, being a beautiful example of a place where the people will say what they want. And if you're not giving them what they want, they'll organize and mobilize to say what they want. But we really do need more community voices in these spaces. And I'm also of the mindset that I don't think the solution is to have all of us enter into political office necessarily, or to work for the city. Not necessarily. I think we need to spread out, and we need to be working at every level within community, from the grassroots level to the state, federally, and everywhere in between, because that's where we can really have the most collective power and agency and make sure that we're giving our communities the things that they deserve and require. That's all I have on that.
Yeah, you knocked it out the park with that one, sis, because I too was struggling with the champion word because, you know, it becomes it becomes very hard when you put all of your eggs in one basket for a champion to do all of it because they can't, right? But when you have people that are spread out across every level, it just makes it that much more impactful and a little bit more manageable, you know, for you to go to different sources and say, hey, I know you've seen this on, I know you've seen this. What are you doing to move it? Hey, I know you've been seeing our hard work. What do we need to do to get in front of the mayor? Hey, like you have to have multiple layers because I mean, I feel like we've all seen it in our own personal capacities where we really trust somebody to go in and do the job and then they get there and they don't. And now we are stuck in this, like, now what? Because we put all our eggs in this basket. So I definitely think that the more that we are able to mobilize ourselves in different spaces, absolutely activism, absolutely community work, absolutely boots on the ground, but also combining that with politics, you know, like, again, it's something that I know historically we have never seen ourselves being that impactful, but I'm sitting in front of a Harold Washington picture. And this is in my office because I had to constantly remind people that there is forward motion here. We are following in the footsteps of people who we never got a chance to meet or know personally, but who had already laid the groundwork for us. But you gotta keep up, you gotta do the work. And so we can't just rely on one person or one organization to get it done for us. We have to mobilize ourselves and really prioritize the people. Like you have to prioritize people at all costs. And it is going to take uncomfortable conversations. It is going to take pressuring some people that you thought were your best buds on the front lines to actually do what they said that they were going to do, because people get complacent, they get in these spaces, and because sometimes we are the only beautiful melanated person in the room, we get the attention, we don't want to share it, we don't want to share the access, it becomes an entire thing. So we have to make sure that at every level we have representation to get the job done.
You said a word, all of it.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's feedback for that question. I do realize that we're slightly over time, and I do want to be respectful of our panelists' time. But I would like to ask one more brief little question that was asked at the last panel that UPPSA did earlier, which is that, do you all have any questions or comments for each other? Anything that you would like to share or say to each other real quick as we end off here?
Y'all are beautiful, gorgeous, dope, amazing humans, sisters, comrades, get donors, push back, don't hold back, power to the people, powered by the people. And it's a breath of fresh air because, you know, we were in a breakout room before this and the excitement, the joy was already there because we don't get a chance to be in the same room with each other. We don't get a chance to share perspectives and best practices. And I think that this is just again, a testament as to why these spaces are so important, because we deserve to be working alongside each other, because at the end of the day, we work with each other, for each other. So I appreciate y'all so much.
Likewise, I really am just really grateful for the opportunity to be connected to you. Bweza, I've always loved everything that you do. I think you're phenomenal, and I definitely have things I want to learn from you. So I'll be reaching out regarding like spur me because me and my sisters and my mom are trying to get into it. But
Yeah.
yes. And Angela, I am incredibly proud of you. I'm looking forward to seeing the work that you're gonna do. And I'm a South Sider, but I'm happy to come all the way up north just to visit with you. Would love to have coffee with you, both of y'all. Like it, I think this was so amazing. So I'm energized. And yes, SBUP, keep doing this. I'm so proud of y'all. This organization has really come a long way. And I'll say one more thing about SBUP. SBUP was formed because of inequities within Cuppa Hall. SBUP was formed because of our issues with the way that they were recruiting students. Cuppa Hall is in the center of the city of Chicago. There is no reason why there should be, at the time that I was there, I'm not sure what the numbers look like now, but the four of us, us founders, would see each other in passing because it was hard. We were hardly in class together. But when we saw each other, you know how we do. We make eyes and we're like, okay, there should be more of us here. There should be more people interested in planning, especially in the city of Chicago. And that's why SBUP was founded. And I'm so incredibly proud of this session and all of the things that are coming out of the organization. So thank you all for keeping it going and doing so wonderfully. And congratulations to you all on all your success in school. My heart is with you.
What do I even say? I mean, shout out to Katanya for creating this organization that has been able to evolve and grow so much. Thank you for seeing that was a need and filling that need, for real. I'm proud of all the students who organized this. I've met y'all a couple times in person, which has been so beautiful. Gives me so much hope and excitement for the future of urban planning. It doesn't have to look the way it's looked. Please don't keep doing the same things. Please make it reflective of us and refer to that Black Space Manifesto, because we need to be doing things differently. Angela, I'm just meeting you, but I'm here to support you in any way. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I'm so excited to see the things that you'll do in your ward and how that trickles out throughout the city. We have to support each other. I feel so overwhelmed with great, beautiful feelings, because going back to that activism question, to me, Black women are some of the original activists. We have always been the ones since the beginning of time who push things forward and put our bodies and our minds and everything on the line to look out for everyone around us. And so it's just always a celebration to be in these spaces where we can celebrate each other, because this work is hard. The work is hard. And I want to put that out for everyone. Like, yes, we can be cute on these panels and say all the right things, but some days it's heavy because it's a heavy load to carry. So just having space to celebrate ourselves and be like, I got your back. If you need me to carry a little more, I can carry a little more today. That's so beautiful and important. But thank you for having me in this panel. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you all so much. I just want to be mindful too that we weren't able to get to the Q&A. So if you all wouldn't mind dropping your contact info for anyone that wants to reach out to you for future conversation.
Yes, that would be much appreciated. And Katanya, you may be excited to hear that these days, pretty much all of the Black MUPPs are part of SBUP. So we call it the family now. Yeah, actually. So we are not strangers, and we really do appreciate that.
I love that.
Somebody asked a question in the chat, which I actually don't know. What year was SBUP formed?
2016.
2016.
So we started working together to build some things out in 2015, but we didn't get our actual sanction from the university as an official organization until 2016.
Got you. Thank
and
you.
Hazel Brown.
Lesson for me.
So three faculty had played major roles in this. It was Hazel Brown, Janet Smith, love her. You might not have gotten a chance to meet her, but she was an amazing woman, and I'm getting choked up thinking about her. And Stacy So, you know, when you see Hazel and Stacy, give them a shout out for sure.
For sure, definitely. Like I said, just want to give another thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, Bweza. Thank you, Katanya. Thank you, Angela, for joining us today. I would like to give a special thank you as well to all the SBUP members and the UPPSA members who came together to try and put this together today. And thank you everyone here who joined the panel as the audience today, everyone who has stuck around with us for the 15 minutes we went over a little bit. But yeah, just once again, amazing panel. It is much appreciated. And I know that a lot of y'all are gonna have to dip right now, so I hope that everybody else has an amazing rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.